Well, hi there. Hey, my name is JD. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to this video. This video is primarily towards and for my students, but hey, if you get something out of it, that's awesome too. And there'll be a link to a couple of these worksheets as well on my website. You can go on there and download them if you want, some PDFs for you to fill out. But hey, today I just want to talk about chords, primarily our 3-note chords and our 4-note chords. And what we're going to do is this is going to be kind of a multi-part because, like I said, this is really some lessons for my students. So there is a chord master sheet and to fill out, and this will be, if you're a student, this is already attached, but if not, go to my website. You can download this as well as the master sheet. And students, there are multiple sheets basically with answers for each column as we go. So you can either just kind of look at those, or if you just want to download them and print them, you can do that as well. But so let's get into this. And what I want to do is just basically do a part for each column, for each kind of a chord. But let's just, if we could, talk about a quick couple definitions if we don't know them already. And you'll see these if you get that master sheet, or not the master sheet, but the one that's all blank. If you would go ahead and print that out or have that ready, that would be great, because you'll see these definitions on the bottom. But just to kind of talk through them to make sure we're on the same part. So firstly, you'll see that there's an idea that says 2 notes apart. So this idea of a half step, most of us already know this, but in case we don't, we're just saying a half step is the closest white or black key up or down from whatever note we are starting on. So starting on a C, if you're looking up here on the keyboard, I see my middle C, up one, that closest black, that's my half step, or down one to the closest white, the B key in this case, is the other half step, other direction, right? If I start on D, both up and down are black. If I start on E, up is white, down is black. So again, it's not a matter of blacks or whites, it's saying it's the closest black or white to, or above or below that note that I'm starting on, okay? So that's important because, again, a lot of people come into this with sharps or flats and think, oh, it's a black key. You know what, 9 out of 10 times, yeah, it is a black key, but that's not always the case, and that's why we use this definition of the closest white or black. It's the easiest one for us to kind of think about. A whole step, you'll see that next one, says 2 half steps, right? So if I'm on a key, we'll just say C for instance, go up a half step, and up one more half step to that D. That's my whole step, right? I'm basically skipping the closest white or black to the next closest white or black. And again, either direction, that's my whole step idea, okay? Now, then there's these ideas of thirds. And if you are into level, I think 1 or so in our piano adventures, or past, we've talked about skips and we've talked about thirds. And the idea of a third is a skip line to line or space to space. But this is even more detailed in saying that there's a major third idea and there's a minor third idea. Okay, so this major third idea is 2 whole steps apart. Okay, again, don't think of it so much as whites or blacks. If I'm going to start on a C and I go up half, whole, half, whole, I don't count this first note I start on. I always count that next note that I go up to or down to. Doesn't matter. Right, so if I'm on C, again, half, whole, so C to E is a major third. Let's do another one. Let's stay E. So if I'm on E, half, whole, there's my 2 whole steps. Again, E to what would be G sharp in this case. All right, let's go one more. Let's start on a black note. How about D flat or C sharp, however you want to think of it. Half, whole, whole. Okay, so again, don't count the note I start on, and then that next closest white or black, closest white or black, closest white or closest white, right? So you can think of it as 4 half steps if you want. Honestly, to me, the better idea is thinking of it as the 2 whole steps. Okay, and then minor third is 1 whole step plus a half step. So again, back on my C to start with, the half, whole, half, right? So C to E flat, that's my minor third. Okay, F, for instance, half, whole, half. F to A flat, that's my minor third. Okay, and some people will say major third versus minor third, kind of happy versus sad. And that's true if that's kind of what you hear. One kind of happier or brighter than the other kind of darker, sadder one. That's good, and that's a good ear training cue to just kind of remember and think about. So the importance of the major third, minor third is that all of our chords, or at least kind of normal chords, are always based off of really just skips, right? If I'm going up my scale, it's like the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. Okay, and then my 15 is really just on that root 2 octaves up. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the bottom, just the major chords, and then again back to just, I started on it. The major third, minor third idea is think of it like blocks, okay? Like you would color blocks or just Legos, right? Think of one as a red block and a blue block, for instance. And to make this first major chord, I'm going to say a red block plus a blue block, right? I'm stacking major third plus a minor third. And as we do these chords, what we're going to see is we're going to see that combination changes to make up these different chords, just based off of these major thirds and minor thirds. And there are some tricks along the way, but that's kind of the theory side of it, I guess, that I'm just blocking, stacking those different kinds of thirds on top of each other. Okay? So the major chord is the major third plus the minor third. And if we're thinking of this in parts, this is really the part 1, the major chord idea. And we're going to take, again, each of these chords in a part that you'll see throughout this video. Okay? So, major chord, a couple ideas. You have the root. If you're looking at the sheet, you're going to see the root of the chord on the far left. And that is like the name of the chord, the foundation of the chord, right? When you see that letter, it's starting off of that foundationally and building up. In this case, building up our thirds of some kind, okay? So let's do a couple here. So let's take our C major. That's the easiest one to start with, just all white to start with. C, take my major third up, half whole, keep the E, go up my step and a half, or sorry, my whole step and a half. From my E, half, whole, half. There's my G, so my C, E, G. That's my major chord, right? And you're gonna write that in that major column next to C, C, E, G. Okay? Let's do a couple here. D, let's go D. Start on my D, find my D, my foundation note. Go up my 2 whole steps, half, whole, half, whole. There's my major third, half, whole, half. There's that step and a half, or that whole step and a half, that minor third. So my D major would be D, F sharp, and A. Okay? So one kind of key rule that I probably should have started with this before is, tell people with the sheet is say every chord should be every other letter. Okay? So if it's a C chord, I know it's going to be C something, E something, G something. Right? So don't worry about sharps or flats as part of that, but think of it as everything should be every other letter. So when I just did that D chord, I knew, at least in the back of my mind, that I should be skipping from D, skip to F, skip to A. Right? I'm going to have at least those letters written down. And then if I find my half whole, that I land on that black key, well, I already know that the letter has to be an F, so I'm going to raise that and do it as the F sharp versus writing the G flat, because that's not the every other letter. All right? Something maybe else we should just double check on, if you don't know, or maybe you don't think of it correctly, is my sharps and flats. Right? My sharps, kind of that pound sign, that number sign, means I'm raising the note up a half step, up that closest white or black. So when we looked at that F sharp, or that black key, we said F sharp because that's my F raised to the closest white or black, that half step up, right? Flats, just the opposite. Flats mean down a half step. And my guess is you probably already know this, because I don't normally talk about chords with you until we've gotten into our scales somewhat, so this should be familiar. But again, flats, down that half step. Now there's 2 other symbols on the bottom of this that we haven't done that you don't normally see, and it's kind of rare. And that's the small X that says to double sharp something. Basically just like what it sounds like. I'm raising it up a half step and another half step. Right? It's basically up a whole step. At least I'm playing it on the keyboard that way. So for instance, an F double sharp would be F, half step up, half step up. It's like I'm playing a G key, even though I might see it written as F double sharp. Okay? So that's the small X, and then this double B, small b, or double flat is the same idea. I lower the note down a half step and another half step. Okay? And we're going to get to that here in a sec. So, my major chords, every other letter, and that goes for the whole sheet, every other letter. And then after I get through my C through B, you'll see that I start getting these notes with sharps or flats on them. And what you got to remember is just like you can raise or lower a single note, I can raise or lower a whole chord. I'm going to take that whole shape and move it up a half step or down a half step. Right? So if I'm looking at the C sharp chord, I can still come down and say, okay, there's my C sharp. I know it should be every other letter, so I know it's going to be an E something, G something. Half step, half step, half step, half step. So E raised gets me my F, so E sharp. Half step, half step, half step. G raised gets me my G sharp. So there's my every other letter. And then I'm sharping what needs to be sharped. But I could have just taken my C chord, C, E, G, and raised it all up and literally just sharped it all, right? So what was the C, E, G now becomes the C sharp, E sharp, and G sharp. And that's what you should do, right? It's great to find it on the keyboard, but you should just sharp it all, right? Let's say flat, so D flat, right? I had earlier, we said D, F sharp, A. And to flat the whole thing, I do the same thing. D becomes flat. The sharp gets canceled, so it's just an F. And then my A gets lowered to A flat. Okay? So, again, either way, I'm just raising the whole thing or lowering the whole thing. If it's got the sharp or flat, it's going to get canceled depending on what it's doing the other way around. Okay? So, in those sheets that I sent you, you should see one that says like chords 1, and that's going to have the answers to your first column and so forth as you go through it. You're going to see the answers kind of per column so that you can kind of work through this on your own. All right? So that was kind of part 1 with the major chords. All right? So here's part 2. All right? Minor chords. So I flip my thirds, just like we did with our major chords. Instead of major third, minor third, I'm going to do minor third plus major third. So I get my C minor from, again, every other letter, half, whole, half. There's that minor third now. Half, whole, half, whole. That's my full C minor chord. Okay? Again, it's the same idea. So there's a trick to this. When I'm doing my... Sorry, let me grab my eraser here. When I'm doing my major to minor, I can take that C chord, C, E, G, and what we just found out was that we flatted our E, because again, every other letter, and if I do my half steps correctly, I get the E flat. So the trick is, from major to minor, and we're going to see that these all have tricks, from major to something, major to something. From major to minor, I flat my 3, okay? So all of those chords that I just did as my major, I should literally be able to just copy, although I still want you to play them and kind of figure them out, but I should be able to just copy the idea. All those notes, if they were correct, they should have a flat third. And when we say third, again, it's saying root, the third, which is that second note, and the fifth, which is the third note. So that middle note gets flatted. So in the case of that D chord that we did last time, the D, F sharp, A, my F sharp gets crossed out because it's lowered back, because it's flatted, right? Just cancels each other out. If I have, this is the only tricky one, if I have that G flat chord, hopefully you did this correctly already, but if I have the G flat chord, which was G flat, B flat, D flat, to flat my third or lower my third, I just flat the flat. Sometimes this confuses people, but don't think of it or overthink it, because really it's saying I have G flat, B flat, D flat, and what was flat is now lowered a half step. That's it. Even though I'm playing an A key, I'm still taking this third and just dropping it. Okay? So if we stick to, again, our every other letter, we should still have the G, B, D in there, and because we already had it from the major, we knew that they were all flats. And then just lower or flat that third. Okay? So the quick trick for this is take my major. If my major is correct, I gotta know these majors. That's kind of the big key. And then I just gotta know these little secrets to catch these other ones. Take my major, flat the middle note, flat that third of whatever it was, and that's now what I should have written in that minor column. And you're gonna see this again on that sheet that says sheet 2. I'll have the answers to both of these. Okay? All right, go do that. Part 3, diminished chords. Now, we're still talking about 3-note chords. My diminished chord is a minor third plus a minor third. All right? So, this is the darker sounding one. Take my C, take my half, whole, half. There's the minor third. Half, whole, half. There's the next minor third. Right? It's that dark vampire at the organ sounding sound of a chord, right? So, we just played C, E flat, G flat. Again, keeping with our every other letter idea. And you'll notice from my major chord was C, E, G. What happened? I flatted my third and I flatted my fifth. And that's the trick. I take my major chord and I lower or flat the third and the fifth. Okay? So I do that through the whole thing. I copy my majors basically, and I take whatever that third is and that fifth is, the second 2 notes essentially, and I flat them. And again, it should be every other letter. It should look just like your major. And if there were flats, just like we talked about before, I need to flat my flat. So when I get down to that G flat, or really a bunch of these flat ones, because you're going to have a handful in here, take my G flat. We'll just use that again. G flat, B flat, D flat. And I'm going to lower my third. And I'm going to lower my fifth. That's it. That's all there is to it. The G flat. And again, don't overthink it. I know it's a white key, or it could be a white key. Don't think about that. Think about what is it as a major chord, and what am I doing to it? I'm lowering it, and I'm lowering it. That's it. Okay? Don't overthink it. That's the easiest way to think about it. Just what is it as that major? Play it physically if you want to hear it and see it, and then lower and lower. Okay? So, that's the big trick. Copy my majors, or think about my majors. When I do that diminish, flat the third, flat the fifth. And again, double flats on the flats. And, the sharps will get canceled by the flats. So they just become just normal. Okay? All right, and you can double check yourself on this one as well on that third sheet. All right, part 4, augmented chords, just the opposite of diminished. Okay, now I'm gonna raise or play major thirds plus a major third. All right, so my C chord again, half whole, there's that major third, 2 whole steps, half whole, another 2 whole steps. Alright, sounds a little dissonant still too. So it's a raised fifth, essentially. Right? If we go back to what we just said our C chord was, it was the C, E, G, and my C, E, G sharp. Because again, I got to keep that G in there and make it whatever it was as that black key. I got to adjust it. Right? So if we see what the difference is, my root's the same, my third's the same, and my fifth is raised. Okay? So I have a sharp 5, if you want to think of it that way. And that's essentially what I'm doing with my augmented chords, is taking my major chords that I filled out already, and I'm using that, and I'm taking that third note of the chord, and I'm sharpening it. Okay? I'm making it raised. Now, if it was sharp, I have to sharp it again, which means I'm going to use that little double sharp idea with the small x. Alright? So for instance, if we had say our B chord, which you should know already by now is the B, D sharp, F sharp, I take that fifth and I raise it, and instead of just writing 2 sharps, what we're going to do is we're going to take those off and we're going to write just a small X. And that X just represents the double sharp. Okay? And again, I got to keep those every other letters, so it has to be the B, D, F somethings, right, with the sharps or with the double sharp and whatnot. So that's all you're doing. Take whatever you had as a major. If there's a sharp on the end, I need to double sharp it. If it was natural already, I need to sharp it. If it was flat, it gets canceled because that sharp erases what was lowered. Okay? So that is the end of the 3-note chords. All right? Playing with major to minor to diminished to augmented. Those are my foundational chords. All right? All right, we're going to move on to the next step after you go fill it out. All right, let's talk about 4-note chords. All right, so hopefully you are done and at least feeling comfortable with your understanding of the 3-note chords, that major, minor, augmented, and diminished, and kind of how you get them, how you form them. And so those are important because those are going to become foundational to basically what we're going to add to them to create these 7th chords. All right, if we hear 7ths, 9ths, they're assuming that I'm building off of this already chord and I'm adding that extension, that 7th, that next kind of skip, essentially, okay? So we keep the same idea of every other note or letter, all right? So my major 7ths, you'll see this in the 4-note chord idea. My major 7th says it's a major chord plus that major 3rd. We can't forget about the major 3rd. So there's my major chord. There's my major 3rd from the G half whole, okay? It's a pretty, it sounds a little bit fuller, but it sounds resolved. It doesn't sound like it has to go anywhere. And that's kind of the idea with a major 7th. And there's another trick to this too, and that is saying the 7th, that tone or that pitch, will be a half step below the root. Okay, so if I know it's a major chord and C is my root, then I know I can come down from that C down a half step, and that's my major 7th. Okay, so let's do another chord. Let's just move up. How about D? So we say D, there's my D major. If I find my root above, come down a half step, I know that key is going to be the major 7th. Now, if I'm following my every other rule, I know it should be a D something, F something, A something, C something. So if that's the key, then I know I just raise my C to C sharp. Okay? So whatever that root is, come down a half step. Closest white or black key, that's the key that you should be playing for that major 7th. All right? So if you have your scale sheets, if you know your scales, the other way to kind of look at these, or to kind of, I guess, see how you're doing with them, is just take your scale and go up every other one. If it's a C scale, they're all white keys, go up every other note of my scale, and those first, or those 4 keys, 4 notes, should be what you have written for your major 7ths, with all the same or correct sharps and flats in them, okay? I think that'll cover it. If you have any questions, I mean, by all means, let me know. But you have the sheet. I'm attaching, again, that 5th row sheet, so that you can check yourself, okay? Let's talk 7ths. So, we talked about major 7ths just a second ago. And a major 7th, we said, is a half step below the root. For a 7th chord, right, meaning it's something 7, okay? They have to tell you if they want it to be a major 7th. If they wanted a major 7th, it has to say major 7th. If it doesn't say that, you assume it's this kind of 7, okay? So, with my 7th chords, I do the same thing. I have the whole, or the major chord first, that's my foundation, and then I go up a skip, or on the next every other letter idea, right? And if I'm following the key idea, I'm going up a minor 3rd, or my 7th is a whole step below the root. Okay, so that same idea with that C, that's my C chord, find the root, come down a whole step, half whole. This one sounds dissonant, this one sounds like it needs to go somewhere, and it does. It's going to resolve. And so this is typically like a dominant chord, and they might refer to it as a dominant chord, or maybe just a flat 7 chord, but that's the idea. It's a dissonant chord. Okay? So, again, my major chord plus a minor 3rd. Okay? And again, if you follow the rule of every other letter, it'll work itself out. And again, you have that sheet, you can double check yourself here, but if you did your major seventh correct, you should be able to just go to that fourth note and flat them, because I'm coming down another half step from the half step I did from my root. Okay? So it should look basically like your major seventh, just a flatted fourth note or the seventh note of that chord. Okay? All right. Last one, minor sevenths. If you've made it this far, minor sevenths are a piece of cake. All right? Minor sevenths has the foundation of a minor chord. All right? It's a minor chord plus a minor third. So I get my C minor, go up my minor third, half, whole, half, and there's my C minor seventh. Okay? So again, they have to tell me this time that it's a minor, and then it has the seventh. Okay? And that's it, honestly. I'm going to take what you've already done as a minor chord, and then add that seventh with the flat seventh that you just did with your seventh chords. It's just kind of a combination of that minor chord and the seventh as far as what I'm writing. Okay? So again, my C, my E becomes flat because of my minor, G, and the B that was as the major seventh is flatted as the seventh, or the whole step below the root. Okay? Again, keep that idea of every other letter that should be in there, because that'll help you as far as keeping everything, again, kind of consistent, and you'll see kind of how they relate a little bit better if you do that, rather than trying to write just like what it lands on as a white key, for instance, or something. So keep it every other letter. Go check it out. You have the full master sheet filled out PDF as well that was attached if you're a student that you can look at. So check them out. Again, this is a series, so if you haven't done these last parts, don't do this yet. All right, and let me know if you have any questions, and we'll go from there. All right, good luck. Okay, bye.